from the period of, I told you a little bit, from like I was 10 when I got my second initiation, then going through the next 5 years really. I was coming back to India every year, going through school. My Gurudev established like a school, you could say, basically like a private school of under his direction. So we had about 30 kids there, and we were all studying our academic subjects as well as having a devotional activities throughout that. So we would have our morning programs where we do scriptural readings and kirtan chants, and then we'd start our academics about 8:30 or 9 or so. So we'd actually start kind of early. So I was between my time was basically mixed between coming to India and going on the festival, the pilgrimages, the yatras there, and then waiting for my Gurudev to come back for our summer event. In the summer, every summer we'd have a festival with our Gurudev, and then other places we would sometimes go. And in between that, like I said before, I was kind of like the farm boy, and then also we had a place in town in the city where we had a gallery. So I would help out my parents in the gallery. So time went very, very quickly between school and the different between school and then parikramas, and then very quickly you could say time sped up at that point. I would say actually, I could say even from that point till now, time's been going very quickly. There was no really any gap, because I guess there is so much to be done that you go through time very quickly. It seems like that somehow, because Gurudev's like giving you this decree at that point, so you kind of gotta you got to put in the internal work through it. So I had a brief time of doubt, not really so much doubt, but a brief time of struggle to embrace that spiritual mission, because naturally being a teenager, you kind of, also for me personally, I was very lucky to be, in hindsight, I was quite lucky because my parents were a very good influence, and they kept me away from, doing things that could be considered leading to bad impressions, to kind of, lead you further astray in your youth. So I was very lucky. In some sense, never took any alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or anything like that. I stayed fairly withdrawn and, very busy at the same time. So when I would say, for me, the struggle between receiving that order and embracing it, I went through, a couple kind of, I don't know how you would call them, but, passing note kind of friendships with girls. And it didn't go far beyond that, but, it was very difficult for me, at least, because, my Gurudev, you always kind of knew that, does your Gurudev really want this? And so not only that, but there was the kind of social pressure, because everyone was like, well, you're supposed to be a brahmachari, And I'm like, well, I'm 15, just passing notes to my friend, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I remember one time our Gurudev, he was giving a morning darshan in somebody's house, and he was talking about, there was some other things going on, especially you would see like Guru. It's not that now something that people need to know. It's not that our gurus are against marriage. Actually, in this age, marriage is recommended. Like it's actually glorified. Marriage is the ashram of Grihastha ashram, the householder ashram, is described to be the support of all the other ashrams. So in the Vedic systems, there's the brahmacharya, the student or the celibate ashram. Generally, it's from youth to maturity. You're supposed to live in celibacy and study and mature. And then from, in Vedic system, from like 25, you get married, you live a household life, you support society, you serve society as in dharma. And then, from 50, you start to retire and absorb yourself more in spiritual studies. And then from the age of like 75, you can take full renunciation and become fully sold into your life of surrender to God in the bhakti. Because ultimately, in the Vedic system, our human quest it's a spiritual journey, a spiritual quest for achieving the transcendental platform. You could say, call it what you may, mukti, liberation. In our case, mukti is actually just stage in between achievement. Mukti is you're escaping samsara, but into what? Mukti means liberation from suffering in the material existence, samsara. But into what? So for us, liberation means achieving your spiritual identity and spiritual reality, where you can be engaged in a very, compared to our existence, think of it as like black and white 2D. It's achieving existence fully dynamic, fully alive, fully full of bliss and joy, and the ultimate achievement of your spiritual potential. So it's it's a path that is experienced also in this world. You can become jivan mukta, living liberated even in this body, if you're fully engaged in this. So what I'm trying to say is that don't think that I'm saying this like, okay, our Gurudev was against marriage for everyone. It's a very noble path, and it's recommended for most. But also there's another option, which is that from student life, you can immediately go into full-time celibacy, a monk life. And in that life, you kind of dedicate your whole energy to serving the mission of this Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage, this path. So that's what my Gurudev desired for me. And there were some others that he desired for this for amongst his followers who were falling away from that path. And so I remember this morning darshan that he gave, where he was very strong against this marriage. He was speaking actually in regard to a different case, who knows really, but as I understand it. But, it laid a deep impression in me myself personally. So I remember after that, we kind of we broke that off very quickly. But from that point forward, that leads me to, I would say, is for me, the second cornerstone, something anchor that you can kind of use as a guide post or a guide lamp in your life, which is for me sacrifice. What is the ideal of sacrifice, and what is worth sacrificing yourself for? That's actually what's most important, because now my Gurudev is telling me, okay, your journey in this life is to be a monk dedicated to my mission. That's a very high demand, actually. So what is worth sacrificing yourself to accept that mission for? And so for me, that led me to, I would say, is ultimately in that process of internal churning, what made me embrace it was, I remember these years that he would give these Harikatha festivals. And in these festivals, he would speak these different talks, Harikatha called. And they were very powerful. Our Gurudev, if you're in the presence of someone who's a very saintly person, when they speak, it said that there are words. There's a verse in the Bhagavatam, our greatest scripture, that says, Santa Vaisha Chindanti Manavyasa Muktibi, that the words of the saintly person, they are like cutting the attachments of the mind and the bondage of the heart for material things. But what they're able to cut them with, different gurus may use different tools. When we pray to Guru, Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshudam Mitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. We pray to Guru, O Gurudev, you give me light and lead me from darkness. And you cut through it's called the cataract of ignorance that is blinding me from the spiritual reality. And so there's that kind of scalpel, the Guru as the surgeon, cutting through your ignorance. So for me, those Harikatha festivals was that kind of internal surgery. But our Gurudev was so powerful that really to awaken a renunciation, to awaken genuine renunciation, it's not something that you can get from aversion to material things. Aversion to material things will lead to dry renunciation that's very brittle. Something that's very brittle can easily break. Something that's supple can bend but won't break. Like a willow versus a dry stick, dry twig. So therefore, when my Gurudev would give his Harikatha, it wasn't developing a dry renunciation. Instead, he was developing a attraction towards this reality that was so beautiful and so full of love and sweetness. And so if you can awaken a greed or a longing that's genuine to go towards that reality, then naturally what naturally results from that is a renunciation from the material. Because you realize that in order to achieve that higher reality of that beautiful, higher loving reality, you have to be really willing to sacrifice the lesser. Krishna tells this in the Gita, that if you want to achieve the higher taste, when you do achieve the higher taste, you can give up the lower taste. but you have to be ready to give up the lower taste in order to fully enter into the higher taste. And so for me, his lectures, his discourses, and their spiritual transformational effect was what enabled me to take on that sacrifice. And I remember very specifically one specific occurrence where he was speaking about Raghunath Das Goswami, who was in our path one of the greatest, those who follow a life of renunciation with what you call anurag. So Vairagya means renunciation, but real Vairagya comes from virag in Sanskrit means detachment or renunciation of something. But raga means attraction to something. So our Gurudev would say that real Vairagya comes from real anurag. And that means the spontaneous attraction that I have to achieve this transcendental thing, this loving reality. So when my Gurudev would speak about Raghunath Das Goswami, it wasn't that he was the best of followers of renunciation. It was that he was the most absorbed in this spontaneous greed, longing for that realm of divine engagement. And so when he would speak like that, I remember after he was giving these classes for like a week. And it was a very interesting time because we live in the countryside, and after the classes, I would go to feed the horses and the cows. We had a farm, so we had cows and horses and dogs and cats and peacocks. And so I would go to feed them after the class. And I remember it was like this thunderstorm and lightning and rain, and it would be pitch black because it was late at night. It was like 8:30 at that point. And so there would be lightning and then light and then darkness. And I was going to feed the animals. And I remember after feeding them, I was really like deeply pondering these classes. And I had a moment of like, where like, okay, I can offer myself to this. This is something that is worthy. Like my realization was that I am willing to sacrifice my being into something if it is something of like transcendental, you could say real substance, real love. And that's why my lesson that I feel myself is that there's really no point in sacrificing yourself to something unless it's based on love and relationship. And so I kind of felt that sense from my Gurudev, and having a relationship with him based on that trusting relationship with him and belief in what he was offering us, that I was like, okay, I can offer myself to this. And I remember at that night, kind of having a moment of kind of, you could say, prayer, looking up at the stars, whoever is there, whoever is up there, for me, Krishna, Shrimati Radharani, okay, I offer myself to this for you. And so whenever you have a moment like that, I believe that that's a moment of, if you offer yourself, you make yourself as an offering, then like our acharyas, they give us a song, De tulasi tila deya samarpinu. With this tulsi leaf, I offer myself to you. Krishna doesn't accept anything unless it's ready to be offered to him, if it's pure, if it's nirgun. So with tulasi, we put tulasi on our neck, we chant with tulasi beads. We offer ourselves like this to Krishna. And so for me, it was like that moment of, okay, offering. And for a few days, it was a very strong impression for me. And afterwards, these things, some time goes by and you go back into your normal life. But for me, as people ask me now, like 15 years later, well, what led you to becoming a brahmachari? And I tell them like, look, I offered myself at that point, and later on, it's not really easy to take those kinds of things back. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm ready I am yours. That's the kind of mood. And so from that was the moment of, you could say sacrifice. And for me, each of these words for me has its essence, its deeper essence. Like for me, the first one is mission. What is the mission of our Gurudev? The mission is for me, it's one of understanding and development of a relationship, spiritual relationship. And we talked about this, I've been talking about this before, which is you have in spiritual paths, you have ones that go towards, you could say, the freedom of liberation and complete independence versus the complete dedication of one-pointed devotion. And so in the complete dedication of one-pointed devotion, the bhakti path, it's not so much about complete freedom. It's not just, I want to be liberated and enjoy the absolute oneness. That's the ultimate idea of freedom. No responsibility. You're just merged into this absolute bliss. That's the Brahman. And that is a legitimate path that you can follow and you can achieve. And in the West, it's very popular because the West is built on these ideals of freedom. And the East is built a lot on the ideals of Dharma, where it's like, yes, freedom is there, but more important than freedom is Dharma. I will do my duty. And higher than duty is love. Krishna says in the Gita, Sarva Dharman Prityaja, give up the Dharma for love. But also if you have that love, you will do the Dharma. So when Krishna says, give up sarva dharman prityaja, he says, give up the dharma for the love of me. That doesn't mean when you love Krishna, you give up responsibility. You embrace the bhakti dharma, which is called the highest dharma or sanatan dharma. So for me, the mission is not one of achieving spiritual freedom. The mission is one of achieving spiritual dedication and relationship.